let's get a sense of what exactly we've done, and just run through some of the facts. 2 trillion naira was the face value of the bonds that you, the non-performing loans that you've bought, and then of course 800 billion is the purchase value, and you've issued 1 trillion naira in loans, or rather in bonds for this. Just give us a sense of how where we go from here from this point, because we do know that what you've issued are consideration bonds.
Yes, we have issued consideration bonds to purchase these non-performing loans. We have 3 sets of transactions we intend to conclude. The first was to buy the non-performing loans of all the rescued banks and all the margin loans for all the banks in the system. That was what this transaction was. We intend to file a registration for 3 trillion worth of tradable registered bonds, and we expect to conclude that by the 15th of February. But because of registration requirements, it takes a long time to get these things registered and filed. So we issued the consideration bonds because it was important to meet the December 31st deadline.
And after this, what next? Because we do know that you are planning to issue more bonds. And what will those bonds be targeted at buying?
The next stage will be to buy the non-performing loans from the non-rescued or healthy banks. And after that, then we'll start discussing with the banks about recapitalizing the banks to zero equity. That exercise will accompany firm binding M&A negotiations with new investment partners for the banks. And as each one is concluded, we'll be issuing more bonds to capitalize the banks to zero to allow those transactions to happen.
And do you have a timeline for that? Is that likely to happen in this quarter, for instance?
We think that all the banks will be capitalized by the end of the second quarter of this year. We expect that a significant amount of them will be capitalized in the next 3 months.
And then let's talk about recoveries, because we do know that, yes, you've bought these loans. You do have some collateral, particularly margin loans where you have listed equities as the collateral. Many people are concerned about how AMCON is going to operate now as a, should I say, aggressive loan recoverer. I think if I borrowed the words of the CBN governor. What's the next stage for you in terms of recovering loans now? Now, what are your targets generally?
Well, we will be a responsible loan recoverer. And like I said before, there's borrowers fall into 3 categories. There are borrowers that you can sit down and restructure their loans and they will reperform. There are those that cannot reperform, and there are those that do not wish to pay their loans. I think they'll be dealt with differently. Our target is to recover 60%, minimum of 60% of the NPL purchases. And we feel we can do better, but our planning is based on a 60% recovery rate.
Give us a sense of a breakdown of what what your portfolio looks like right now in terms of equities, unlisted equities, property. We do know you have a bunch of assets that you're holding for these loans.
We believe that equities from listed equities is about 45%, non-listed equities about 10%, and other types of loans will be 45%.
And then let's talk about the rescued banks. We do know that, like you mentioned, the probably second or third stage of this bond issuance would be to invest equity in the rescued banks that still need some equity to get back to at least zero shareholders funds, which will now obviously make a deal with a potential investor possible. How much do you anticipate that you might be investing in these banks?
The numbers we have is somewhere between now 1.3 trillion to 1.6 trillion naira.